Olivia was 40 years old and had been married to her husband Brendan for 20 years. She had worked her whole life as a kindergarten teacher, and he was a CFO of a private company. Her husband had always been the main provider, and Olivia was financially dependent on him. The couple raised their daughter thanks to Brendan's good salary. They lived in a beautiful house in a decent neighborhood, and their daughter attended a good private school. Because of this, Olivia turned a blind eye to her husband's constant infidelities and only tolerated them so that their daughter could have a complete family and the opportunity to have everything she wanted. But when their daughter graduated and went to study in another city, Olivia realized it was time to start living on her own. Their story together began 20 years ago, when Olivia was a simple and naive girl who believed that the most important thing for a woman was to marry well and have a child. She met Brendan at her best friend's birthday party. He was 27 years old at the time. They liked each other and started dating. A year later, he proposed to her, and they got married. When they got married, Brendan had already bought his own house. So the newlyweds lived happily and carefree, just for themselves. But soon, Olivia became pregnant, and everything changed. The entire pregnancy was at risk of miscarriage, and intimacy was out of the question because Olivia needed peace and Brendan began to cheat on her. Olivia found out about her husband's affair when their daughter was 5 months old. She went to their house herself when Brendan was at work. Olivia opened the door and saw a young woman standing at the doorstep. She was very beautiful, as if she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. She said she needed to urgently speak with Brendan, that he was avoiding and ignoring her, and she was carrying a baby under her heart. Olivia was shocked and just closed the door in front of her without saying anything. She went to her daughter, hugged her tightly, and began to sob as if seeking support from her. The baby was playing with a rattle, and of course she didn't understand what was going on in her mother's heart. When her husband came home, she gave him a scene and he confessed everything. As it turned out later, the young woman was not pregnant. She knew Bruce was married and thought that after her news Olivia would ask for a divorce and Bruce would be exclusively hers. But they didn't divorce. Her husband swore his love, begged for forgiveness, and said it was the first and last time. And Olivia believed him. Years went by, but Olivia still felt that her husband didn't love her and was probably cheating on her. Several times she smelled someone else's perfume. One day, she unpacked a business trip suitcase. She was very surprised to discover that half of the things in the suitcase were beach clothes. Olivia didn't tell her husband everything at once because she didn't want their daughter to be a witness. She waited until night, and when they went to bed Olivia said it was very strange that he needed many t-shirts and flip-flops and only 2 white shirts on a business trip. But her husband had his own explanation for that. He said the conference was in a seaside town and of course, he went to the beach in his free time. He had just thrown some of the shirts away. He spoke so calmly that at that moment Olivia began to believe him again. Life went on, and after a while Olivia found out about another lover of her husband. She caught them herself. Olivia became sick at work and asked to go home. Near her house, she was surprised to see her husband's car. Before she could think about it, her husband came out of the house with a beautiful blonde woman. When he saw Olivia, he was speechless. This time, Olivia caught him red-handed and realized that it was definitely the end of the relationship and the divorce. But in the conversation, her husband touched on a sensitive point. The fact that Olivia had a small salary and no own house and she couldn't support and raise their daughter alone. Losing her daughter or leaving her hurt and upset was Olivia's greatest fear. And once again, she let him walk all over her. The saddest part was that, except for her husband and daughter, Olivia had no family and therefore no support in such a difficult situation. She had lost her parents when she was 13 and was being raised by her grandparents, who were also no longer alive. She also sold the small house she inherited because of Bruce's advice and her foolishness. That's how she became completely dependent on her husband. More than once afterwards, she noticed signs that her husband was cheating on her, but she remained quiet. Olivia already knew what would happen when her daughter went to college and just patiently waited for that moment. The woman decided that's when she would stop allowing her husband to abuse her. Shortly before the divorce, she planned a small revenge against her unfaithful husband. Olivia could tell from Brendan's behavior that he was seeing someone else, and he hardly even tried to hide it. Brendan kept a notebook where he wrote down all his login information and passwords. This way, Olivia always had access to his social media accounts. She quietly observed the relationship between her husband and his new lover. And then, the time for her revenge had come. Brendan said he was going fishing with a friend for a few days, but Olivia already knew the truth from social media, and that's what she pretended to believe for her revenge. Early in their marriage, doctors took a long time to discover the cause of her husband's allergic skin rashes. It turned out to be an allergy to lavender. Olivia always washed his clothes with lavender-based detergent, which she stopped using after discovering this. So, nearly 20 years later, Olivia put a few drops of lavender oil in a water sprayer and sprayed it inside her husband's underwear. When her husband returned from his fishing trip, he was devastated. Olivia asked what was wrong, and Brendan panicked, saying he had some kind of hives and pointing exactly where in horror. Olivia couldn't help but laugh and told him how disgusting and promiscuous he was, dragging diseases into their home. Her husband had such a sad face that Olivia even felt sorry for him for a second, but then remembered how he treated her all these years and told him that while he was relaxing on a fishing trip, she filed for divorce. Of course, Brendan tried to manipulate her by using his favorite speech about where Olivia would go and how she would be alone. But Olivia didn't care anymore. Her daughter had grown up and there was nothing to keep her near that traitor. She took the suitcase she had packed earlier and got into a taxi. She went to a friend who lived in a big house and kindly offered to stay with her until she got back on her feet after the divorce and rented her own apartment. Olivia gladly accepted the offer, but it turned out she didn't even need to look for an apartment. Shortly after the divorce, she moved in with another man, her friend's single brother who often came to visit his sister, and that's how they met. Brendan soon broke up with his mistress, claiming he was allergic to her, because when he went to the doctor he said he was just having an allergic reaction, not an illness. The daughter learned of her parents' divorce and said she knew about her father's infidelity, and secretly dreamed they were divorced. Olivia realized she had put up with everything in vain. Children want their parents to be happy, and she made a big mistake by her own example. Olivia was teaching her daughter a terrible lesson about enduring bad behavior in marriage. Dear friends, write in the comments what you thought of this story. I invite everyone to say which city they are watching from. Thank you all, have a great day, and subscribe to the channel for more wonderful tales.